Hello, welcome to How to Fall in Love with Your Husband. And so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes together talking about one of your most important relationships. And I'm going to help you look at the thoughts that you have about your marriage and about your husband. My name is Jill Lillard, and I am a licensed therapist. I'm certified with the Gottman Institute as a couples counselor, a couples relationship expert. And I have worked with couples for over 20 years, helping them create better marriages. And so I do intensive work with the marriages that I work with, and we create better marriages. I also run an online community, the Happiest Lives Academy, where I help women, Christian women, not only be better wives, but to create better lives. And so I am looking forward to spending this time together with you. And so it's going to be chock full of a lot of things. And so we're going to just hop right on in. Now, when you think about falling in love with somebody, it sounds like you're just tripping, you're stumbling, something is just happening to you on default. And in the beginning of a relationship, when your chemistry is high, when there's lots of oxytocin and dopamine rushing through your body, um, it's going to feel like you're falling into it, like all of this stuff is happening. And so our body does release chemicals that create attraction and that make us feel good and that create more safety. It's the same chemicals that are released in new mothers who are breastfeeding or even giving birth. And it is not realistic to think that that chemical rush, that chemical high will sustain itself through an entire marriage. That doesn't happen. And so sometimes we have those expectations that we want to still feel that amazing euphoric feeling that we felt when we were falling in love. And so we're going to talk about how to create a a fiery, a fresh, and a devoted relationship when you've been married to someone longer than 6 months, when you not only have all the good things going on, but you do have conflict, you do have differences, you do have different desires and wants, and you're bringing your lives together. And so the Gottman Institute talks about our relationship in terms of um, the foundation of it is our friendship. And so a good marriage has a solid friendship at the foundation. And that friendship is made up of three components. And so I'm just going to share those with you, but that's not where we're going to spend most of our time today. But I think it's important to look at what is happening when a relationship is being built when someone is quote falling in love. So one part of that is love maps. That is all you're feeling known by your partner and feeling like you know them. And so in the beginning, when you're establishing this relationship, there's a lot of curiosity. You're asking questions. You're getting to know somebody's inner world. And so that's something you want to keep hitting refresh on throughout your relationship. It's really important. And yet so often we start to feel like, oh, I know this person. And so we quit hitting refresh. But think about all the stuff that goes on in your life, in your inner world on a daily basis. Like a lot of times we don't even know ourselves, much less someone else. So always hit refresh because we're always evolving, we're always changing. The chemistry in our body is changing, the way we think is changing. And so you want to stay connected to this person rather than feeling like you know them and take everything for granted. I think the second part of the friendship that is happening when you're establishing a relationship and when you're maintaining that foundation is the fondness and admiration. And so you are having all these positive sentiments, these good feelings. You think this person is amazing. And it's like you become a mirror to one another where you're bringing out the best. You feel amazing about yourself. You like yourself in this relationship. Well, the same thing happens as the relationship progresses, that you start being a mirror that reflects the worst about yourself too. You start seeing the whole of yourself as a human being, as a person inside of a marriage. And that's why I love marriage work, because it causes us to be honest, it exposes us, it challenges us to work on the deepest places within us. And it's not always easy, but it's some of the best work. Relationship work is some of the best work that you will ever ever do. And so the third part of the relationship is the turning toward versus turning away. And so that's the bids we make to connect. And it can be very mundane things. It doesn't have to be, whining and dining and big fancy trips and fancy things. It is the little things. If your husband is sharing something with you that maybe he's reading off of his phone, maybe it's sports statistic, he's trying to make a bid to connect with you, and responding to that, acknowledging that bid is super important. And the more you engage with that, the better. If you're folding laundry, just coming alongside someone and doing that with them, those are all little ways we knit ourselves together. And so, where I'm going to spend our time talking today is more about your thought life. So, what goes on in here? We know that for every one negative, you want to have 5 positive. And so, all those positive sentiments, good feelings, you want them to overshadow the negative 5 to 1. You want to invest in your thought life in this way. And so everything that happens outside of you is a circumstance. It's neutral. And so everything your husband says or does, you're going to have a thought about it. Your brain filters that information. You assess it, you assign meaning to it. And that is going to release chemicals in your body, a chemical cascade, which we call a feeling. And based on how you're feeling, whether you feel content or happy, or you feel frustrated, sad, hurt, you are going to show up in a certain way. Your actions, that emotion is going to fuel your actions and your inactions, the things you do and you don't do. And that's going to give you your result. So if my husband does something and I am thinking my thoughts and feelings don't matter to him, then I might feel hurt. And so then I might engage with him in a way where I withdraw, or I'm short with him, or he's sharing something important and I'm kind of dismissing it or not really engaging when he's making a bid to connect. And the result of all of that is his thoughts and feelings don't matter to me. And so whatever it is that we're thinking, there's going to be some version of that that shows up in the results we're experiencing. And so it's really important to be aware of your thought life, to know what it is that you're thinking. Our life, our marriage is not just happening to us on default. It's happening because of the thoughts that we are thinking. And so we get to choose. We get to invest in certain thoughts and release other thoughts and let them go. And so let's look at what are some potential thoughts that you might have? And I guess I further want to say that your relationship, based on what I just shared a minute ago, about how our mind responds to circumstances outside of us, our relationship exists in our head. We want to say it's because of the thing that our husband's doing or not doing, or the interactions that we're having with each other, but really it's our thoughts about it. However we're assessing that information, however we're assessing that experience, is what is going to create the experience that we are actually having. And so we like to think that the relationship is that space outside of us, but it's what's going on in here. So, and I think some proof of that is your husband may compliment you and say, "Oh, you look so beautiful," but you don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel beautiful. And so you might be rejecting his thought. You might be rejecting what it is that he is saying, because your thought is what's creating what you feel. Otherwise, someone could tell us something like, "I think you're so amazing," and you would think, "Oh, I'm so amazing," and you would feel amazing, but that's not always the case. We can have positive thoughts about someone else. There's a podcast I listen to. I love the lady. I know a lot about her life. I love the things that she has taught me. I feel like she's had a big influence on me. And so I care about her in that sense. I feel like she's a good friend, and yet she doesn't even know I exist. And so this is proof that our thoughts about the other person is what creates our relationship more than it is the other person's thoughts about us. So I want to look at 3 types of thoughts that you might be having, and so that you can consider where you are spending your energy and time in your thought life. And so one type of thought we have is what you think about me. And so when I am worried about, or I'm thinking about, or I'm investing in, what does this other person think about me? I'm going to try to manipulate their thoughts. I'm going to try to manipulate their feelings by the things that I do. And so there's nothing wrong in trying to do something that you think someone might appreciate or that might make them feel good. But when you are trying to control something you can't control, you're going to feel very frustrated, and you're going to expect that they react in a certain way. A good example of this is getting a gift for someone. You might put a lot of thought and energy and work into giving that gift, and yet they might not be excited about it. They may not have the reaction you thought they would have. And so when I just put my focus on in being the person I want to be and showing up the way I want to show up, rather than how is this person responding to me, it's going to be a much more useful way of spending my thought energy. And so I want you to just think about how much time you spend thinking about what your husband thinks of you, or are you going inward? Are you finding that validation, based on what's going on inside of you about what God thinks about you or about how you are showing up? Are you putting your focus on the part that you can control rather than the part that you have no control over? And so I think the second type of thoughts that we have is what I think about you. And so these are all my opinions and judgments about my husband. Um, you may think things like, my husband is amazing, he's so handsome, he's so smart, or you might spend a lot of time in judgment. A lot of times we spend a lot of times in judgment, thinking negative thoughts are about how we think somebody else should be showing up, what they should be doing so that we will feel better, rather than thinking, what can I do to make me feel better? We think about how can they, we put that responsibility externally, which makes us feel very powerless and frustrated. And when we're spending our time judging somebody else, thinking we know how they should be showing up in life, rather than thinking about how we should show up, we are out of line. Matthew 7:3-5 says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." And so I always think there's so much work I can do on me if I spend my energy focusing on what he should be doing when I have no control over that. I'm just going to be spinning my wheels and feeling frustrated. So the third type of thought that we have is what I think about me. What are we basing that on? And so if you're always trying to prove your worth and you're always trying to prove your value, so that you can be more loved, you aren't going to have this stable sense of self. And so when we look at what God's word says about us and we invest in those truths and those thoughts, we can have a more stable sense of self. And until we remove our identity from being based on external things rather than internal things, right? And Christ lives in us. This is his home inside of us. And he tells us who we are. He gives us thoughts that we can think. If we're not doing that, as circumstances change, as people change, as people do things, we're going to feel very unstable. We're going to be constantly changing too and feel very insecure. We may receive an overwhelming amount of messages from the world, from our husband, that is going to help make us try to measure up externally. But what if instead we were basing our identity on how God sees us? If we shifted our energy from trying to please our husband or trying to view ourselves based on how he sees us, or on the way we're trying to prove ourselves, trying to be worthy enough, the way that we're behaving, that it's enough, it we're just going to be exhausted. But when we look at that we already are who God says we are, then our identity can be grounded in a place that cannot be shaken. And when we think about who we are, the first thing that's going to come to mind is that we are God's beloved and his favor rests up on us. And so how would viewing yourself change the way that you show up in your marriage and how you feel about your marriage and how you feel about your husband? And what gets in the way of you doing this? In Ephesians 1, we can see what God says about us. And in that, we discover that we have been blessed with every spiritual blessings. We have been chosen, adopted, we are redeemed, forgiven, grace has been lavished upon us. We are unconditionally loved. We are accepted. We are pure, blameless, forgiven. We have received the hope of spending eternity with God. When we see ourselves, when we see our identity in Christ, we know that nothing can alter what we do. The way our works is never going to alter our worth and our value. And so that way we can take actions, we can show up in certain ways because it's fun and it's because of who we want to be, not in such a way where we're hustling and we're trying to prove ourselves. So I hope it's been helpful to look at the 3 types of different thoughts that you might be bringing to your relationship. And I want to close with Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And so I like the acronym as well. Think. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And I like to evaluate the thoughts that I am having, the thoughts that I'm investing in. Just because a thought's coming by, don't judge yourself or resist it. Like, don't think that, don't think that. You may be having the thought, just let it be like a cloud that kind of floats by above you, and then put your focus on these other truths. And so you can control your thoughts. You can choose what thoughts you invest in, but we cannot control other people's thoughts. And when we're thinking that somebody else's needs to change so that we can feel better, so that we can feel more love, that thought does not serve us. It's useless. But when we focus on how I can change, how I can think, how I want to show up to feel better, then we are investing in a thought that's going to be very helpful for us. You want to be able to accept your husband for how he is. He is an adult. He gets to do what he wants to do. It doesn't mean you can't make requests. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't share your dreams and turn toward. I'm not saying any of that. But when you come from a place of acceptance, you can receive the person as they are. And if you are committed to staying in this relationship, you get to decide what you want to think about it. You get to decide how you want to feel about it. And that doesn't mean you have to feel happy about everything all the time. It's very appropriate to feel sad sometimes or to feel hurt. You just want to see if that thought is serving you and if that's something that you're spending a lot of your time in. And lastly, you want to invest in thoughts that focus on how God sees you and how God sees your partner. So I hope that that's helpful. I have a free mini course for you if you would like to get it. It's at thehappiestlife.com, and it's the 4 things you must do to become the happiest wife. There's 4 short videos, 4 short lessons, and there's a little workbook you can print and write in and go along, and I think you'll really like it. So thanks for spending this time with me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the retreat.